and a coach. And in this channel, we talk about healing and emotional intelligence subjects and how we can use them to create a more fulfilling and abundant life for ourselves. So today we're going to talk about manipulation. And we're going to talk a little bit about how I define manipulation with some examples of how we use manipulation on our day-to-day life, and also how we can leverage manipulation in a way that is more in alignment with our spiritual journey. So first, we all know that in our society, manipulation is pretty much a dirty word, right? It always has a very negative connotation. And when we talk about someone being manipulative, we always assume that that person is being manipulative out of them being evil or having evil intentions to control another person or situation, right? But what if I told you that manipulation is not evil at all? It's actually pretty neutral. And if I use the definition of manipulation that one of my mentors, Teal Swan, uses, her definition is that manipulation is trying to meet your unfulfilled needs indirectly. So let that sink in for a second. It is basically, we all have unfulfilled needs. And if you think about it, most of us are constantly trying to fulfill those, oftentimes in a direct way, but more often so in an indirect way. And if you think about it, it really rings true because most of us are actually, I believe all of us, have a great capacity for manipulation. In fact, I believe all of us manipulate on a pretty daily basis. We're just often not aware of that. So one example that I can give of manipulation is a situation where a child grows up in an abusive environment. And again, there's varying degrees of trauma and abuse, but let's assume that in this particular case, the abuse is physical, but this could apply to any type of abuse or trauma situation, right? A child that grows up in an environment like that is living in an environment that is oftentimes unpredictable, erratic, controlling. And what happens is that the child has to learn to perceive the most minute change in their surroundings, in their environment, in their abuser, in order to be able to react to that quickly and accurately to keep themselves safe. So what happens is that a lot of these children learn at a very early age and very almost innately how to manipulate situations. And the reason why they learn that is not out of being evil or having evil intentions, is in fact a survival mechanism, is a defense mechanism to ensure their safety and their survival. So it is actually a very natural thing. So for example, in a situation of abuse, if that abuser that person could be in a very good mood, right? And all of a sudden something happens completely external to the child. Something happens and the mood of the aggressor or of that abuser shifts. It is imperative for that child to be able to perceive that again quickly and accurately and be able to manipulate that situation to remain safe. And that could be done in a variety of different ways. It could be done through avoidance, through redirection, through disconnection, or what have you. But it is a way of manipulating your environment to keep yourself safe. Now, I want to be very careful here that people that are watching this video understand that I am not using the common definition of manipulation where we think is something bad when you're trying to control someone else. I'm using the spiritual definition from my mentor of manipulation, that is trying to fulfill a need indirectly. And in this case, the need of that child, the right of that child really, is for safety, for physical and emotional safety. And it is, and what I have found in my journey, and I'll speak for myself, is that I actually am a great manipulator. I didn't realize that for most of my life. I didn't even realize that I was actually trying to manipulate people in situations because it became such an ingrained part of my personality, because it's something that I have, or my behavior, I should say, because it's something that I had to learn to do at a very young age and had to learn to do it well all the time and learn how to do it very quickly. So what happens is that we learn those skills, which again, a defense mechanism, a survival mechanism, and as we progress through our life and get into adulthood, we continue to carry out those strategies or carry those strategies with us, even though they may no longer be necessary because we are no longer in an unsafe situation, right? So I wanted to use that example, and it is a very personal example because I do think that the key to manipulation is, for me, is twofold. Is the awareness that all that we are doing when we're trying to manipulate a situation or another person is that we're trying to fulfill a need, and we may not be aware that we are manipulating. And furthermore, we may not even be aware of the fact that we have that need, right? So that's something that is very important to become aware of. The other thing that I think that is important to remember is that most people, and I believe everybody really, but just for the sake of argument, I'm going to say most people do manipulate on a pretty regular basis. And then manipulation, like I said before, is just a mechanism of survival. So how can we use this in our life to become, or how can we use it in a way that is in alignment with our spiritual journey? Well, there's two ways that we can do that. And first is what we just talked about a moment ago, which is that awareness of the fact that when we are, of what manipulation actually really is, and that awareness of what the need is and how we are trying to fulfill it. But also, and I'm sorry, I'm looking now because I'm looking at my notes because I don't want to forget. But the other thing is that we need to also understand that there is another side to manipulation. Manipulation, like most of our strategies, are in a spectrum, right? So there's something that we view as negative. You can't see my hands, but I'm moving my hands. Something that we see as negative and something that we see as positive. And there's every shade of gray in that spectrum, right? So to me, the other extreme of manipulation, or the aligned version of manipulation, is influence, right? Because that's exactly what we're trying to do when we're manipulating someone. We're trying to influence them. The difference for me is that manipulation is covert because we're not telling the other person, it's not clear that we are doing it or why. And oftentimes it's not even clear to ourselves. But influence, on the other hand, is overt. When you are trying to influence someone, you are doing that knowingly. You know that you're trying to do it, and the other person also knows that you're trying to do it. So that's the two pieces that I think are very important about manipulation that we can use in our day-to-day life for our own growth journey. And it is to become aware of what our dynamics are and what other people's dynamics are. And here is why. When you're in a situation where you're trying to manipulate someone and you become aware of that, then you have that moment, you have that experience, that knowledge where you can try and center yourself and figure out what need it is that you're trying to fulfill in that moment. And why do you believe that you cannot ask for that need to be fulfilled directly, right? So those are two really helpful pieces of information that you can have. And it actually can be very helpful for your own journey, but also for the dynamic with the other person. The other thing is, if we look at it from the perspective of the other person or someone else trying to manipulate us, it can also be very helpful. Because when we are engaged in that situation and that dynamic, we can take a moment, and as soon as we become aware that someone's trying to manipulate us or manipulate the situation, and again, I'm not using the negative connotation or the negative definition for it, but when we become aware that that person is trying to manipulate us, we can then, again, take a moment and then honestly come forth and ask that person, if you care to do so, right? This is assuming that the person has the skills and the maturity level to engage in this conversation, right? but you can honestly ask the person, what is it? What need do they have in that moment that they're trying to fulfill? And what that does is that actually opens the door to create a more healthy and mature dynamic of connection with someone else. Again, like I said a minute ago, it assumes that the other person has the skills, the interest, or the maturity level to engage in that dynamic. But this is how we can harness the power of manipulation for our own self-development. So with that, I'd love to hear in the comments what you guys think about this topic. If you are someone that considers yourself manipulative, how you use manipulation in your day-to-day life. And if you're interested to learn more about me or my work, I am going to put the link to my website on the description, so you can go to my website and take a look at the information that is there. And as always, thank you very much for your attention, and until next time, namaste.